The largest grant I received is $146,000 at one time. A six-figure grant hit my account. And this particular grant, they didn't require any follow-up. They didn't require any documents after. They only requested that I reinvest it back into my business. I remember a moment of pulling in the parking lot at work and crying. I couldn't pinpoint what was wrong, but I just wasn't happy. I knew that this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. There's definitely more out there for me. And I'm sure it was just being overwhelmed with work and new mom and, running a business. But I remember pulling in the parking lot and just bawling.
Say that someone is listening to this, and maybe it's even before they've started their business. What would you say is like the step 0?
I have a 3-step strategy, and the first step is...
Okay, so before we get into this episode, literally right before I headed into the studio, my team handed me some research. And what it said is that less than 50% of the people that watch this channel are actually subscribed. When I heard it, I nearly fell off my chair. But no, in all seriousness, please subscribe to this channel. And if you do, I promise that we will take every part of this show to the next level. Scale the guests, scale the production, scale the marketing. So please subscribe to the channel and let's grow together. Coach Kate, let's say that they stumbled on this video, they were browsing on YouTube, and they're curious about startup grants and funding. Maybe they're looking to start a business, or they've already started a business. What would you say is the value to them of watching this video, of learning about funding and grants?
I love that question. So in this video, I will definitely detail how to get access to grant funding. Most people don't know that they qualify for grants as a for-profit or a nonprofit company. They also don't know what's required to get access to this capital. So I'll be sure to just provide value on how they can get access to grants, what grants are, where they can locate the grants, and how they can get access to this funding that's debt-free, no credit check, and no requirement to repay it back.
Awesome. Okay. We're going to get into it and how someone... not only how can they identify grants, but then also apply and be successful in applying. But before we do, I want to get to your story. And obviously at the moment that you're at, you've successfully gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants. You've helped other people get millions in grants. And I actually don't want to start there. I want to start before. Because in your story, you were at Wells Fargo, you were working a 9-to-5. And so even when we talk about entrepreneurship or being an entrepreneur, where did that dream even start? Where did that even begin?
So I started my business or my journey into being an entrepreneur for a selfish reason. I needed childcare for my daughter. So as I'm going around and I'm searching for childcare, I couldn't really find anything that would meet my standards. And nothing offered. Either it wasn't affordable or they didn't offer extended hours. So I created the solution to the problem. I created a child care center for my daughter, but also for other parents who needed affordable child care with extended hours. So I kind of just threw myself into entrepreneurship. No one around me was an entrepreneur. My parents are not entrepreneurs. No one in my family. So it was learning this strategy and learning how to grow my business on my own. And I made a lot of mistakes on the journey, just trying to figure it out. So at the time, I'm a working entrepreneur, starting a business, new mom, and just trying to figure it out.
You know what, let's go I want to go a bit deeper and give me the context of your life at that point. You're working at Wells Fargo. What are you even doing there? What is?
Yeah, so working at Wells Fargo, I have worked in every area of the bank. I work in private lending, where you had to have $1 million, consumer lending, and business lending as well. But at the time, I was actually in business lending. So I was helping entrepreneurs get access to capital. So I knew about LLCs. I knew about the funding opportunities that were out there. So I thought I had it. I thought I knew it all. I thought I had it all figured out. Working for Wells Fargo, I see all of these people coming inside of the bank. They would come in with their new documents, their LLC information, and they would want startup capital for their business. But most of the time, we were declining them for funding. So going into a bank and getting access to traditional bank funding is a challenge. So I had to be the face and I had to decline them. I had to be the dream crusher. So I seen a gap in just education and what was required to get access to this traditional bank funding. Along with that, I'm starting my own journey in being an entrepreneur as well. So now I know what it's like to start a business and need the capital and not have a resource to kind of lean on.
Yeah, okay, that's so interesting. And it reminds me of, we had a guest a few months ago. Her name is Ashley Fox. She owns a financial literacy company. And in her story, she was working on Wall Street. She was working with these like really wealthy clients. And there was it was this huge education for her of how like the system works, of how rich people kind of operate and navigate their money. And it's interesting because I think one of the things it really confirmed in my mind, and I was already kind of aware of this, is that we have like this information gap where I think within banks and within the system, there's certain people that understand and know how to navigate. And then for everyone else, it's like, it's a complete mystery.
Yeah.
And even to your example, like people will come in with applications for grants or funding or whatever the thing is, and they'll get rejected and you don't know why. And so I'm curious to understand, when we talk about like an information gap, what was some of the information that you realized most people don't actually know this? They don't understand that this is how it works.
One of the biggest things that touched me and made me want to start teaching others is I would notice that minorities would come into the bank and they wouldn't have their kids with them. They would come in, they would be by themselves. They might take a couple of suckers. You go in the bank, they have the little dum-dums you take out. But other races would bring their kids in the bank with them. And they would allow them to watch them do transactions. They would sit them down in the office with the bankers and discuss finances in front of their kids. Minorities, we usually don't do that. We make the kids stay outside and, stay out of grown folks' business. Stay in the car. And I'm going to bring you a sucker out, where other races, they are bringing their kids in with them, sitting them down and allowing them to hear these conversations at an early age. So really it just starts with being in the room. I think that's what the starting point. And there was a particular gentleman that he adopted a young lady from China. He came into the bank. He opened her up a teen checking account. He later came in, opened her up a college checking account and her first credit card. A couple of years later, he came back in and she was ready to close on her first home. By the time she graduated college, she was ready to close on her first home because he put her in that space. He educated her about finances early on. I can't count on my hands how many times I've seen a minority do that in the 15 years I worked for Wells Fargo. So that's where I seen a real gap and wanted to kind of be the change and go out and start educating not just entrepreneurs, but people in general about finances and how to get access to this capital and the opportunities that are out there for us that we are missing out on.
Yeah. You know what comes to mind? I think when you're a kid, and you probably, this as a mother, and I see it even in my younger siblings, you're so open to information. And I think a lot of the times we actually underestimate what children can understand. And sometimes just by being in the room, just by observing, they pick up so much.
Yeah.
And it gives you this like incredible head start in life, which is what it sounds like for that guy's daughter. Like she just had an incredible head start.
Absolutely.
You know what? I'm curious to understand, because you mentioned you're working at Wells Fargo. I'm assuming it's a pretty decent paying job.
It is.
What even makes you want to start a business? Like, what was that moment, the experience that's like, okay, I'm actually going to take the risk and the additional work of starting something else?
Yeah, I mean, seeing others come into the bank and helping them get access to this capital was kind of like, oh, I can do this too. And I always took it as a learning opportunity. When someone came into the bank and they had access to, or they had a couple $1 million sitting in their account, or they were closing on a $2-3 million loan. I always soaked up as much information I could as possible. I'm asking questions, what are you doing? And most of the time, no matter what client I was helping, if they had a large value of assets in their account, they had some type of business outside of, even if they did have a corporate job, they had a business. So for me, that was this 9 to 5 is not going to get me where I really want to be. And so then I seen the opportunity to start the child care center, which is where I kind of really took the leap. And then just kind of soaked up all of the knowledge that I learned from the bank and then just kind of went for it. Made a lot of mistakes, like I said, a ton of mistakes. I didn't have the support. I didn't have the accountability. I reached out to a couple of people who were in the industry and no one would really help. So no mentor, just kind of tried to figure it out all on my own. But it really was just using the platform that I had with Wells Fargo and leveraging the resources, because they have a ton of resources that allowed me just to get the information I needed to go for it.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, I think, as entrepreneurs is that even at an early point, we tend to have like a vision long term of like where we see ourselves. And I think people have different motivations. Like for some people, they just want they want to be rich, they want to be successful, or it's more so that they want the freedom and the control over their time. Maybe what's motivating them is like family or these sorts of things. I'm curious for you at that point when you decide to start the daycare center. I understand that you're trying to also kind of solve a pain point and a problem that you have. But what is like the deeper motivation of like, I want to make money, I want to start a business? Like, is there someone that you're doing it for? Or is there something external that's like happening that's
Absolutely.
fueling that?
So recently just retired my mom. My mom finally retired. Initially going into corporate America, I thought I was going to be the person who worked for a company forever. But there was a situation where I closed on I want to say $3 or $4 million loan with Wells Fargo. And as a thank you, they gave me a certificate to go on the company's website and buy a t-shirt. So for me, that was the moment of, yeah, this isn't for me. But also the drive to just make sure that my family is okay. I've watched my mother work forever. She's worked for the same company since I was born. So recently retired her, and I think that was one of the key things that I wanted to do, watching her get up at 4:00 in the morning, drive an hour, work at a factory, and she's getting ready to be in her 60s. So for me, it was, I have to do something different to make sure that I'm not in that space at 60 where I'm getting up at 4:00 in the morning to work for a company. And then I have a daughter. So she's watching what I do the same way I watched what my mom did, thinking that I was going to be in that space forever. So now the drive is knowing that someone looks up to me. I'm someone's idol. Somebody's watching me, and I have the opportunity to give her a different platform to go out and just make the decisions that she wants to make.
That's powerful. I'm curious, are there certain moments even from growing up and seeing your mom wake up at 4 a.m., are there like vivid memories that you have of just like it being like a struggle for her, or it like that job just wearing on her?
I think the biggest gap is her not being able to be as present as she would like to be. For like after school activities, she would always come. I was always in dance. I was always in cheer. I tried to do volleyball and track and things like that. And she would always attend the events, but it would be at the end because she's had to work all day. And, other parents would be there. They would be teen moms. They would come in and be, present for the entire thing. And my mom's just walking in, just getting off of work, just in time to pick me up and take me home. So I think that was the biggest thing, or the biggest gap, where I can say that she probably struggled with just not being 100% present when she could have been, because she's working and has to make sacrifices to make sure the bills are paid.
And so you had that desire just to, like, I guess for your daughter, you want to be present. You want to be available.
Absolutely. 100%. They had which is why I came this morning. They had a school event yesterday, and I'm like, I'm not missing it. I have to be there. So that's key for me, just making sure I'm there, because I know what it's like to look up in the stands and your parents are not there at the moment. They're coming, but they're not there right then. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. You know, it's interesting with your story about you close like this $3 to $4 million deal, and the thanks that you get from the bank is like this gift certificate. And the reason I say it's interesting is because I have this in my story as well. And I've spoken to a lot of people that work a 9 to 5 and then they go and start a business. There's always a moment when they were working their job, and it's kind of a strange moment where you almost get to look into the future, and you kind of see, like, I could reach the top of this field. Like, I could reach the pinnacle accomplishment, whatever that is. And this is the reward that I would get. I remember for me, I was working in marketing, and the CMO, so the chief marketing officer of the startup that I worked at. So he's the head of marketing. He's reached the top of, like, the track that I'm on. He's reached the top of it. And I remember him coming into work one day and he's complaining because the founder of the company will just call him at like 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. or like to discuss something about the business. And for me, it was like kind of a moment where you're like, even if you reach the top of this lane, you will not have autonomy or freedom over your time or that boundary. And it kind of just puts things into perspective, and like it creates a drive of like, okay, I need to rethink the way that I'm going about this.
For me, it was, if I can do this for this company, if I can work this hard, because this is a company, the $3 or $4 million deal that I closed on, I sourced the company, I found the client, I built the relationship. So if I can do this for this company, imagine what I can do if I just go all in on my vision and what it is that I want to do. And that's eventually what happened. I was eventually terminated from Wells Fargo once I decided to teach this information and show people how they can get access to capital and funding. Wells Fargo terminated me. So, you know, then I decided to go all in, and the drive and the energy and the dedication that I was putting into the company, I put it into my brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? I want to get into the brand, and I want to get into how someone can find and secure hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants.
Okay.
But before we do, I want to talk about the daycare center quickly, because you start doing this business, and you even alluded to it earlier. I think as entrepreneurs, we go into these businesses and we have so much enthusiasm. We have so much energy and excitement about what we're going to be able to do with this, where we can take it. And then invariably you come across like the struggle and the obstacles. And so take me back to those moments, like those experiences. Like, what comes to the forefront of your mind even when I say these things?
Oh, there's so many, but just being excited to open up the childcare center was huge. Being the first entrepreneur in my family, I have tons of support. And then I opened up my daycare center and we have 2 kids. You know, so we have 2 kids for a couple of weeks, but because I have 2 kids, I still have to have at least 4 employees. So now I'm only making a couple of dollars, but I still have this overhead and this payroll that I have to pay. So that was one situation. Shortly after that, the state decided that they were going to change the requirements. So now we're getting kids enrolled. You know, things are starting to pick up. I feel like we're going in the right direction. And then I get a letter in the mail that says, hey, we're changing our requirements. So now where you used to be able to have 50 kids, now you can only have 25. So it was this, I'm at this high level or this peak because I'm growing, I'm doing this, I'm making it happen. And then now it's kind of like, oh, you can only we're cutting the amount of kids you can have in half. So that was just a moment where I'm sitting there and I'm like, what am I going to do? I've invested my entire savings account into my business. I've maxed out my credit cards. I think I got it all figured out. I've called parents and asked them for loans and favors. I've done everything that I can do. So those were kind of the key points, or some of the key moments that just made me sit down and figure out what's going to be the strategy and what can I do, or how can I put things in place to continue to grow this business and go all in on my mission without closing my doors or feeling like I'm a failure.
Yeah. I'm curious for you because it's kind of it's interesting to me, like the pathway of an entrepreneur, where, like I said, you start with kind of the enthusiasm and the energy. You then come across these obstacles, and for you, it's like, okay, how do we get more kids here to start with? And then you kind of reach this point where things are actually, it feels like things are working. like things are clicking. You're like, this is kind of why I did this. Like you're just getting those signs of encouragement. What is that peak moment for you? Like, what was the moment where you kind of felt like this is actually working? Like, we've got something here. Like, I might actually make this work.
Yeah. I'm sitting down at the table one day and I'm like, ooh, I can pay all the daycare bills. And for me, that was a huge like accomplishment. I'm looking at my overhead. I've made payroll and there was a couple of dollars left. It wasn't a lot, but I was able to pay all of the bills without going into or using my paycheck from Wells Fargo, you know, at the time, using my paycheck or, you know, having to borrow funds or having to do anything outside of the business to make it happen. So for me, that was the first moment of, you got this, girl. And that was a huge turning point for me.
Yeah. What's that feeling? It's like relief, I guess. Like
Relief. You can do this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? Contrast that to me with you. What was kind of like what was the moment that it was like, it was really a struggle?
Okay, back to the episode in 60 seconds. But first, let me know if you've had this experience. You log into your online banking, you check your bank statement, and you see a bunch of charges from subscriptions you didn't even realize you're still paying for. I've had this happen numerous times, and so heading into the new year, I started using the sponsor of today's episode, Rocket Money, to help manage my finances. Rocket Money is an all-in-one personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. And so here was my experience using it. And let me take you guys back a few weeks. So I installed the app on my phone. I signed up. I linked my bank account to it. And once I did that, Rocket Money automatically identified all of my subscriptions and put it into a single list. When I went into that list, I was shocked to see how many subscriptions I was paying for, many of which I don't even use. I even had some services I was paying for on multiple subscriptions. And so with a few taps, I was able to cancel some of these subscriptions directly from the Rocket Money app. You can also use Rocket Money to scan your bills and find savings there. They help with setting budgets and automating your savings. And so if you want to try Rocket Money today, use the link in the description and you will get their premium membership for free. That's rocketmoney.com/Callum Johnson. Go to that link in the description. You can get the premium membership for free. Okay, back to the episode in 60 seconds. But first, I wanted to share a quick story with you guys. Over the last few months, I've been taking my health much more seriously. I've always been someone that works out and goes to the gym, but I wasn't paying as much attention to what I was putting into my body. And so after a ton of research and Googling, one of the things that has become a core part of my routine is drinking AG1. And fortunately, they're also the sponsor of today's episode. So first off, I'll say that I am typically incredibly skeptical of these healthy green drinks and trends. And AG1 was no different. I remember the first time I had it, I'm mixing it with water in my kitchen and it comes out this deep green color. And I'm looking at it and I'm expecting it to taste terrible. But it was really smooth and very easy to drink. It wasn't your typical green drink by any means. And the health benefits have been great as well. It has all of the probiotics that you need for optimum gut health. It also has all of the adaptogens, vitamins, and minerals that make sure all of your foundational health needs are met. It's just a good, healthy start to my day. And so heading into this new year, I'm drinking AG1 every morning. And here's the best part. AG1 is offering new subscribers a free $76 gift when you sign up. So you'll get a welcome kit, you'll get a bottle of D3K2, and 5 free travel packs in your first box. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com/Callum to get the offer. That's drinkag1.com/Callum. Thank me later. Let's get back to the show.
Yeah, there was a dark moment where I get the letter that they are cutting the amount of kids that I can have in half, but because of the size of the building, I still have to maintain the same amount of employees. So cutting the amount of kids I have, but I still have to have the same amount of team members. And a couple of weeks go by, maybe a month or so, and I have to make payroll. Remember, I've maxed out my credit cards. I've emptied out my savings account, but I still have this paycheck that I'm getting from Wells Fargo. So I get a paycheck. It's time to make payroll. I had to decide if I was going to make my mortgage payment with that paycheck or if I was going to use it to pay my employees. So for me, that was a huge dark moment because I'm risking the roof that I have, or the roof that I have over my daughter's head, and what I've built and what I've worked so hard for to kind of invest into this business. So I had to sit down and figure out, what do I truly want and how can I make a change, because this cannot happen again. Of course, decided to, use that paycheck and fund the business, which it worked out in my favor. But that's how I kind of got into grants. That was the moment where I'm like, something has to be different. And that's why I started writing grants.
Yeah. I think so many times in conversations like this, we don't talk enough about like the human being that's involved. And so I think about, and where my mind went is, you even said it earlier, like you started this business, there was multiple reasons, but in part to like secure the future and like security for your daughter. And then you arrive at this moment where the business itself is almost like directly threatening the security of your daughter. And so I'm curious to understand, for you as a human being in that moment of like, you're faced with this decision, like, do I fund the business or do I pay the mortgage? Like, where is your mind?
All over at this point. Trying to figure it out. I'm still working, so I'm trying to balance work, being an entrepreneur. There was a point where I was getting off of work and going to work at the daycare. So now I'm in the space where, my daughter's there, that's her bonding time. We're getting off I'm leaving the daycare at 7:00, going home, cooking dinner, and that's our day. And I'm doing it all over again. So now I'm depressed. I'm exhausted. It's showing up in other areas. I'm not performing as well at my job. It took a toll, a huge toll. But I really just had to sit down and say, hey, snap out of it. What are we going to do to make this work? And that's kind of how I've always been. Either we're going to go all in or we're going to let it go. And I just decided to go all in. Yeah.
Yeah. So you go all in, and you go all into, and it was even like the grants like kind of helped you in that moment. Do you remember like the first grant that you successfully got? Like, what's the story?
Yes. The first grant I received was a $500 grant. It was from a foundation, a local foundation in Huntsville, Alabama. They gave me a $500 grant. And first I got this $500 and I'm like, what am I going to do with $500? And I got an overhead of like $10,000, right? But it was like this light bulb went off, like, wait a minute. All I had to do was answer like 4 questions to get this grant. And I answered these 4 questions, and I just simply told them about my mission and what I wanted to do. And they gave me funding in return. Probably took me less than 20 minutes to complete this application. $500 in 20 minutes. I think I can do that, right?
That's good math.
Yeah. So that was the drive. That was the turning point. Like, wait a minute. All I have to do is answer a couple of questions, and these companies will give me money to fund my mission. So I really just locked in on that and just started writing grants over and over and over again. Got declined for a lot, got approved for a few, but that was the moment where that first grant created just something different in me.
Okay, I want to get deeper into it.
Okay.
But I'm curious, how far have you seen, because you mentioned your first one is $500. I'm curious how far you've seen it go. Like, even with clients that you've worked with, or even for yourself, like, what are some of the amounts that you've seen that you're like, it would blow your mind that you could get this amount of money, debt-free, no strings attached, like, it would blow your mind. Like, what kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, we have a young lady who is at $1.7 million in funding that she's received. She's probably a little bit more now. But the last time we checked in, she was at $1.7 million in grants that she's received. We have another lady, she's based in Memphis. She's received 2 separate grants for $500,000. But she's also received grants for $2,000. So it just depends on how aggressive that you can be. But there are tons of opportunities out there. You just got to go for it.
Okay, you know what? Let's get into it. And what I want to do actually, before we get into the practical stuff, I also want to, because I think there's a lot of like misconceptions about grants or like myths. And so I want to read a few and I want to get your reaction and we can just go through it.
Love it.
Okay, so here is, I was thinking about reasons, even for me as a business owner, like, because you hear about grants, but you're like, I'm not really going to put too much time into it. And I was thinking about why is that for me personally? So the first one is the thought that really grants are for like non-profits, like only non-profits can qualify for that sort of funding.
That's the biggest misconception. Anybody who thinks about grants, they immediately think you have to be a nonprofit. You can get access to capital whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit. Now, you want to take it to another level, you have both opportunities. So you have a for-profit and a nonprofit. We'll dive into that later. But you can get access to grant funding whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit.
Okay, here's my number two. And this is probably the biggest one for me, is the thought process that in order to be successful in getting grants, it's just going to take a lot of time. And it's also like it's a complicated process. And so for me personally, it's like even before I started my company and I'm just planning it, it's like, oh, there's so much work that I already have to do just to build the business. This is like an external thing, which is going to take a lot of time, which is complicated. I need to get my mind around it. And the chances of me succeeding and landing something are quite small. So it's like the balance of like time with like, I can actually get it.
There are some grants that take time. Your larger 6-7 figure grants are going to require a little time, right? We have to be able to explain how we're going to use the funding. However, there are some grants that take less than 60 seconds to complete. You want to do one together?
Yeah.
You want to do one now?
Yeah, we should do one.
Let's do one. Okay, go to theLegacyGrant.com.
TheLegacyGrant.com. I love that we're doing this. Making it real actionable for people. Okay.
Yes. So it's a $2,500 grant.
Okay.
We give it out every quarter. And this grant only requires that you answer one question.
Okay.
What are you going to do with the funding? Now, when we are answering this grant question, you just want to be detailed how you're going to use the funding to grow your business. There are so many grants out there, just like the Legacy Grant. One question, less than 60 seconds. You can do one every night before bed. And you always have something in your pipeline. So there's always going to be a grant opportunity that's going to roll in.
I'm assuming when you're applying for grants, that's a pretty common question, right? Like, what are you going to do with the funding?
Absolutely.
How do you recommend people answer that question?
So I have a strategy that we use and that we've helped people be successful with getting access to grant funding. We're real, right? So R is making sure that you are relatable to the investor. So the person who has the money that we are requesting, make sure we're able to relate to them and tell them how we're going to use the capital. E, you have to educate them about your business and your brand. Don't assume that they know because you have a podcast or because you're in the childcare industry that they know who you are. You have to be detailed about what makes your business and your brand unique. A, you have to have an action plan. No matter the amount of funding that you're requesting, how are you going to use it to grow your business or make an impact? And then L, you have to make sure that the companies love you. They have to be able to look you up. They have to be able to locate you online. And they have to be willing to want to invest into you and love your story that you're going to tell. So simply be real.
That is so good. Okay,
Yeah.
I like that. And so I'm thinking, even as you're writing that, are you almost splitting the sections of your answer to address that? Or is it like overall, I guess, your answers just hits on these certain points?
Good question. So it depends on the grant. So some grants only want a paragraph. So I simply create a paragraph that drafts around what I just said. This same paragraph, I can use it over and over and over again. So we can take that paragraph, apply for the Legacy Grant, and then we can go take that same paragraph and go apply for the Greatness Grant. That's by Nehemiah Davis. So these are grants. One time we create one paragraph and we're applying for grants over and over and over again with that same paragraph using the same strategy. Sometimes there are grantors who want you to have a grant proposal. So with the grant proposal, we have to be a little bit more detailed, but still hitting on those points and different bullet points within the full proposal.
Okay, this is good. I need to start applying for some grants.
Yes.
Okay, so here was my my fourth point, or the fourth thing that was kind of like, it was like an obstacle in my mind. It will cost too much money. So basically the idea that like, in order to be successful, I'm going to need like a professional grant writer or someone to come in and do this for me. And you know what it's like in the early stages of running a business. Any dollar that goes out needs to be like heavily considered.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also another thing that holds me back.
Yeah, I agree. So a grant writer is not, it's not always required to get access to grant funding. I tell people all the time, at some point in your business, you do want to hire a grant writer to do the service for you. But when you hire a grant writer, as a contractor or a worker within your business. So you want to, before you hire somebody in your business, you want to make sure you understand the job, right? You want to make sure you're able to give them a SOP and systems and how they should be able to do the job. So you need to learn the strategy first before hiring a grant writer. You also want to make sure that you are applying for some of these grants and getting some money coming in, and then you can take the grant funding that you're receiving and go out and invest into a grant writer. There's another opportunity where we have people who are hiring virtual assistants to go out and write grants for them. So now you're able to put them in a Coach K class, or, you know, give them access to a course, or put them through a certification process. And now they are your certified grant writer that works within your business. Or something that most people don't leverage enough, AI. AI is an amazing platform when you train it and educate it the correct way. You can't go to AI and say, hey, write this grant for me. It's not going to help you win the grant. But when you train it to work for you, you train it to know your business, know your brand, know your mission, and you detail exactly what you're going to do with the grant funding, it's going to help you locate, write, and apply for grants.
Yeah. You know, that AI point is such a good one. It's interesting because we had a guest a few months ago, and he's like deep into the AI space, both professionally, but like in his own life. Like literally because I met him at an event first, and he opens his phone, he opens ChatGPT, and he was just showing me some of these models and that he's created for his life. And the AI literally knows everything about him. And it was one of those things, it was like a mind-opening moment for me, because you can give ChatGPT so much context and so much data and information about yourself, where like when you're asking it these questions or you're giving these prompts, the responses it's giving you are actually at like a really high standard. You're like, this is basically like having another human, like a really smart human next to me that understands exactly what I'm going through and like the context of my business, and then can just fire out these answers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you train it the correct way, you can access and leverage grant funding using AI. Now, grantors do have a feature called Zero Chat GPT. So sometimes they can tell if you're using AI. So this is the key on using it and leveraging it the correct way. Training AI to understand your tone, how you write, the things you need, getting to know your business a little bit better. And that's how we go out and leverage grant funding using AI.
That's good. And you know what? It actually reminds me of something that he said to me, which he said, the kind of the mindset shift you need to make is think about 80%. The AI will get you to 80%. So if you're trying to send out grants, it will, if you've trained it correctly, if you've done the right things, the right prep and given it the right prompts, it will get you to like 80% of where the answer is. And then it's helpful if a human or yourself can kind of come in and add a bit more of those personal elements.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's key. And that's how we do it. We have someone inside of our community. He just received a $150,000 grant, and he leveraged and used AI to write that grant. He has a medical transportation company.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Dang, okay. You give me some motivation right now. I need to start doing this.
Yeah,
Okay.
there are a ton of grants for podcasts.
Yeah.
Ton.
Yeah.
Yes.
We need to talk about that afterwards. Okay.
Yes.
You know, I want to get into the steps of like from A to Z. Before we do though, I'm curious from your story, because your first grant was for $500. I'm curious, do you remember the grant that when you got it, you're like, this is almost like a surreal amount of money that I just got.
Yeah, I got a grant for 100. The largest grant I've received is $146,000 at one time. But the grant that was really like, oh, wait a minute, was $100,000. A 6-figure grant hit my account. And this particular grant, they didn't require any follow-up. They didn't require any documents after. They only requested that I reinvested back into my business. So I was a for-profit company, LLC, had a couple years of age on my business and received 6 figures. They didn't check my credit, went into my bank account, and all I had to do was reinvest it back into my business.
What's the emotion for you at that point?
At this point, I'm like nervous because is this real? You know, yes, I applied for it. It's not one of those, you know, how you get those random calls like, hey, you won the lottery and you didn't play the lottery. Yeah. It wasn't one of those. This was actually something that I truly went out and applied for. And I knew it was real, but to see it in my account, in my business account, it was like this moment of, I can't describe it, but it was like a next level, just nervous at first, and then how am I going to execute on this immediately after?
Yeah. It's a nice problem to have, though.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. It was a great problem to have.
You know, here's where I want to go. I want to go to, I call it step 0,
okay,
which is like, you know, say that someone is listening to this, and maybe it's even before they've started their business, and they're just thinking about the planning, because obviously money comes into it really from the beginning. You're like, how am I going to fund this? And so they're listening to this and they're starting to get that excitement of like, okay, I didn't even know this avenue really existed like that. And I want to put some time against it. And I want that time to be successful, to be like productive. What would you say someone, I either have a fresh new business or I haven't even started it yet? What would you say is like the step 0? Like it's the foundation of like where you need to begin to be successful.
So I have a 3-step strategy, and the first step is the foundation. So one of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make is we have the vision of starting a business and we just jump out there. We don't put our vision down on paper. We don't create a business plan. And most of the time, people don't even register their business with the Secretary of State. So if you're watching this and you're like, hey, where do I start, Coach K? I want access to grant funding. What do I do? Make sure that you put your vision down on paper, create a business plan, and then register your business with the Secretary of State. Simply by having your business on the Secretary of State's website could get you access to capital and funding. Companies are out there looking for people to invest in. So they can call you and say, hey, we have this funding opportunity available for you. Tell me more about your business and more about your brand. So having that LLC, that S Corp, C Corp, nonprofit, that's the starting point. Sorry, that's the starting point and the foundation, and where I would encourage people to start.
Yeah, we know even when it comes to like the business formation, I know this is such a nuanced conversation, and there's like different points for each type of business. I'm assuming the most people that you would work with, or people that are even starting their business, I'm assuming they start an LLC.
Yeah, most common when we're starting, entrepreneurs start with the LLC, easiest way. And then as we grow, as we get revenue, then we consult with the CPA on what our tax filing status should be. But LLC is the easiest way.
Okay, that makes sense. And you know what, I want to get into something that you mentioned, which is the business plan. Mm-hmm. And so I have this thing with business plans, because I think I see the advantages of it. I also see that for a lot of people, I feel like, and this was for me, this is like a personal thing. Because even before starting a podcast, I tried to start like apparel brands and clothing companies. And a lot of them, I remember the first one, I never even launched it because I spent so much time on this business plan. Mm-hmm. And it became like this form of like procrastination of like, I'm kind of scared to launch this thing, but like, I'll just keep doing the business plan. And so how does someone, like, tell me what are the core elements of what need to be in that business plan where like, this is actually valuable and it's going to help me get grants and funding down the line, but I'm not just sitting here procrastinating and like, it's now 30 pages long and I haven't done anything yet.
Good question. So one, I would tell them to leverage AI. I'm going to go back to AI. AI will draft your business plan for you. Now you have to give it and feed it information. You can't just go to it and say, hey, write me a business plan. It's not going to give you what you want. But go in and put your thoughts, put, all of your thoughts and your vision down in your little chat box and let it create the business plan for you. SBA also has an amazing platform where they have free business plans, or they will connect you with a mentor that will help you with your business plan as well. So most people don't use that. The Small Business Development Center is available in every city, and they'll help you with your business plan for free. But one of the key things I think people miss out on with their business plan is the budget. Because companies and funders want to know how much money you need and where is it going to go. And your business plan is your roadmap to success. So now you're able to tell these companies when they ask you, well, why do you need the capital? You hand them this document and it shows your roadmap. It tells the story of where you're trying to go.
Is there a certain, I'm kind of curious, because I guess I think about like business positioning, like the way that you frame and position your company. Are there certain types of companies, and even I guess this comes into even building out the business plan, where it makes it more likely that you're going to win grants and funding?
It just depends. There are certain companies who they only want to fund nonprofits, right? And then there are certain companies who are looking for people in the education space. They're looking for people who are doing community service. But I have been able to get people access to grant funding. We have somebody who just received a $10,000 grant, and she has an Airbnb. So it's about how you position your business on the paper and on this document that separates your business from everyone else that's applying for the grant. So this young lady has an Airbnb. However, when we applied for the grant opportunity, we talked about how she's using her Airbnb for emergency shelter or for domestic violence victims when they need a place to stay if her Airbnb is vacant. So she's using it for a cause. She's a for-profit company using it for a cause, giving back to the community, and now she was able to get access to a $10,000 grant to reinvest back into her Airbnb, or essentially go get another one if she wants. So it's all about how you position yourself on the paper. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. There's an opportunity out there for you.
You know what comes to mind right when we started talking about this? You gave that framework, real. And you said the thing that it has to be relatable to who's like providing the grant.
Absolutely.
And that's what, even when you give that example, that's what came to mind for me, which is like, there's actually this research process or like this research component of understanding like, well, who's giving the money? Like, what do they care about? Can you kind of talk about that? Because that feels intentional to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a great example. Chick-fil-A has, they give out $5 million every year in grant funding. They have a grant that opens up in March of this year. It's called the True Inspiration Grant. They want to know how you're being an inspiration. So if I'm applying for this Chick-fil-A grant, I'm not going to go on there and talk about starting my business and needing access to capital. I'm going to talk about how I'm being an inspiration. Now, starting my business can be a part of that paragraph, but I'm going to really, really dive in on how I'm being an inspiration, whether that's in my industry or in my community. So that's what I mean by being relatable to your investor. Mackenzie Scott, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, she gives out millions. She gave out a grant, I believe, $640 million in grants in 2024. She that particular grant, she wanted to fund nonprofits, but she wanted people who just simply were making an impact. You just had to talk about the impact you were making. So ton of funding opportunity out there. It's just being relatable to that investor.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so I'm curious, how are you getting that insight? Like, for example, with the Chick-fil-A, the grant that they offer, is that there's just like a web page where they like explaining it out? Or even the McKinsey Scott, like where is that insight coming from?
Oh, you're giving your audience like the game.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Yeah, I love it. So there is one of my favorite websites is Grant Watch. Grant Watch is a very user-friendly website. They will have a lot of local funding opportunities. They will have a lot of foundation grants. Whether you're a for-profit, nonprofit, small business, and most people list their grants on Grant Watch because of it. It's one of the best platforms. So that's the easiest to navigate and probably the best one to find new opportunities that are out there.
Okay, so that's like you're finding them there. And then even when, as I guess people like click onto these pages, you can see, I'm assuming, you can see in the information, like what's going to get you selected.
So on Grant Watch, they actually provide a summary of what the funder wants. So as you go to Grant Watch, they'll tell you how much the grant is worth. They'll tell you what states that they want to fund, if it's universal or global, or just United States. They'll tell you that. But they give you a summary of what the funder wants and the amount that the funding is going to be for. And then they provide you the link where you can go directly to the funder's website. Sometimes on the funder's website at the bottom, at the very, how you're doing something, it says terms and conditions at the bottom. Sometimes on the funder's website, they have something very similar to that. And they'll tell you how your grant application is going to be graded. So they might have a 25-point grading scale, 4 parts to get you to 100 points. And they're going to tell you what each category is going to be worth. So this is how you make the connection and how you're relatable to your funder, because you're reading the fine prints to find out what they want and who they want to fund.
You know what's interesting is actually, as I'm listening to you, where my mind went, and we were speaking earlier about AI, it's like I think the key thing that I had to realize about ChatGPT and AI, I remember that actually the guy that I interviewed, creator, his name is Mr. Grateful, his handle on Instagram. And he says to me, the mistake that most people make with AI or ChatGPT, they treat it like Google. So when you go into Google, right? Like if I want to know where the Atlanta Hawks play basketball, I will ask it a question and Google will spit out a response. He says that's how most people use ChatGPT. No, the right way to use ChatGPT is it's a conversation. It's like this back and forth where you're giving it prompts and you're giving it context so that it can then give you a response, and then you're almost like critiquing its response, and this conversation is getting you closer and closer to a great answer.
I love that.
And what came to mind when I was even listening to you is they're giving you so much context and information on these grant pages about how to successfully win the grant. You could just copy and paste that information and put it into your ChatGPT, like the chat box. And the response that it's able to give you is actually going to be customized to securing that grant.
You can take the URL and just plug it in ChatGPT and it does it for you. You can take the URL of your website and plug it in ChatGPT and it'll create so you can take both and it will create a summary of the grant and an answer based off of the information that's on your online website.
That is so
That's how
good.
You leverage AI.
That is so good.
It's a part of our journey. We just people gotta get equipped to it because it's taking over.
Yeah. You know what? I want to help people in that starting phase of like, they're just starting to apply to grants. We went over one, which I did on my phone, the legacy grant. Are there any others that when you're like, even you start working with clients, you're like, this is a great one almost just to get your feet wet, like just to start, just to get that first application out?
There's another great opportunity. I think we touched on the Greatness Grant with Nehemiah Davis. That's another one that's amazing. But there is a company called Skip, Hello Skip. They give out a grant, $1,000 grant every Tuesday and every Friday. You can be a startup, you can be in the idea phase, you can be an existing entrepreneur. You go on their website, apply for this grant. They ask you a couple of questions, but they announce the winner on YouTube Live. So you have to be on their YouTube. If you're the winner, they bring you up, they showcase your business so other people can support. But that's an amazing startup grant. But what I particularly love about their website is not only do they advertise their grant, they give you an opportunity to apply for others. So that's another source where you can find grants for your business as well.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, you know what? Here's where my mind goes, which is, let's say that they've applied to like Hello Skip, and they successfully got it. They're on the YouTube Live, they're brought up, they've successfully got their first grant. And you said that one is $1,000.
$1,000.
So $1,000, like I'm off to the races. Where my mind goes is now you almost need to make it like a system. You need to make it a routine where you're regularly doing this thing. If you want to see in any field, if you want to see great results, it has to be part of something that you're doing consistently. And so I heard you say this in an interview. You said if you apply to 21 to 30 grants per month, you have a 90% chance of getting a grant.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, like when you're working with clients, I almost call it like the success routine. Like when you're building that routine of how you're getting those 21 to 30 applications out, what does that look like on like a weekly basis?
We're applying for 1 grant every day. So I have a list of, we're in the middle of January. I have a list of grants that I'm already going to apply for in February. So starting February 1st, I have 1 grant that I check off every single day. And I just go through the list. Some of those grants are as simple as the legacy grants. Some of those take a little bit of time. I try to make sure the ones that take a little time are located on the weekends because I have a little bit more flexibility to apply for those. But I just always have something in the pipeline that's always coming through. Some months I might get no grants. Some months I might get 2 or 3. So I always have something that's coming in, and I don't overlook opportunities. So if there's a grant that's $500 and I qualify for it, I'm applying for it. If there's a grant that's $100,000, I'm applying for it. If there's a grant that's $500,000, I'm applying for it. So I make sure I apply for all opportunities as well.
Yeah. Would you say even for I know you mentioned you had a client that got like $1.7 million in funding, or someone that got 500,000 on 2 occasions, because those are like outlier scenarios. So what is separating them and their approach? Because there's a lot of people that will listen and maybe they'll apply for one and they don't get it. That's actually what I did. I think I applied to a grant like a few months ago and I didn't get it. I was like, I ain't doing this. So what separates like me from someone that gets that like 1.7 million, just in terms of their routine, like their inputs, what they're doing?
Yeah, I'll use Miss Emma as an example. She received the 2 grants for $500,000. Miss Emma is a working entrepreneur. She's in Memphis, Tennessee. She's building a youth center in Memphis. So when people say they don't have time, I always use Miss Emma as an example of no excuses because she still makes it happen. But she uses the strategy of 1 grant every single day. And she's also really big on reaching out to the funders and the foundations who have the funding opportunities, introducing her business, introducing her brand, talking about her mission and the impact she's going to make when she does get access to the funding for the youth foundation. So I think she's about $500,000 away from everything that she needs to make the whole vision happen. But she's the one, no excuses, 1 grant every day. I always use her as an example of what you can do if you apply this strategy.
It's just that, it's that consistency. Okay.
Yep. No excuses and being consistent.
I need to get onto it.
Yep.
You know what, even, because you kind of, in that process, I always think about how do you make things easy? How do you make things simple for yourself? Because I think when it comes to being consistent, if there is too much friction in a process or it's too difficult, after you might be able to do it for a week or 2 weeks, you might just be able to brute force and will yourself to do it. But after a certain point in time, there's going to be a day where, things got super busy, or you didn't sleep well that night, or, your kid needed this, and then it drops off. And so I always think to myself, how do you make things easy? And something that actually came to mind, because it feels from listening to you that you always have this list of grants that are like in mind. And then in the morning, you're just checking off the list of like, okay, I sent the application. And we were talking about AI. I'm assuming that you could literally go into, and you probably know better than me, but you could literally go into ChatGPT and say, I don't know, I have this business called The Callum Johnson Show where we interview entrepreneurs and creators or whatever, like what your company does. And then I'm looking for grant funding. Can you find 10 grants that you think could be a fit?
Yeah.
I mean, you could literally build the list that way.
Absolutely. So you can build it that way. So inside, I have a community, and inside of my community, we give entrepreneurs access to an AI software that I've kind of plugged my information in and educated it on the grants. So we do leverage that to find grant opportunities. You can actually go in and plug the date. Hey, it's January 15th, I'm looking for 10 grants. I live in Alabama, and it will find 10 grants that are open and active and available for you. So yes, you can use and leverage AI to find the grants that are out there and available. Something else I always do to make sure I'm prepared, every time I'm applying for these grants, I'm not typing out a full paragraph every single time. I always have this information on hand and ready and available. So that real paragraph that I create one at the beginning of every year, and I use it all year long, because sometimes my mission change, my budget goal changes. So I just create that same paragraph, and now I'm just copying and pasting. I also have a grant proposal always on hand. So when I'm applying for this grant, if it asks me for a document, I already have it ready, and now it's just copy and paste and putting the pieces to the puzzle together. So that's what kind of, I think people kind of get discouraged when they're applying, because they're not prepared. But when you're prepared, it just makes it easy. So now the one grant a day is not as challenging as we think, because it's already at our fingertips.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the grant proposal, what goes into that?
Yep. So your grant proposal, a good business plan is actually a grant proposal.
Okay.
Yep. So if you have a solid business plan, you can use it and leverage it as your grant proposal. So in your grant proposal, you want to make sure you have an executive summary that just summarizes the business, the vision of the business. You can include your mission statement, your vision statement. One of the key components that I love inside of a grant proposal is a problem statement. And this is what most people miss out on. With getting access to grant funding, they want you to do two things. They want you to find a problem and be the solution. So if I have located a problem and I can figure out how I can be the solution to the problem, this opens up the door for more funding. For example, I located a problem with affordable childcare. When we mention affordable childcare, it typically doesn't have quality education. So I became the solution to the problem, and I started incorporating STEM-based education into my childcare center. So now I've located a problem in my community, in my industry, and now I'm the solution to the problem. That's what these funders want to see. So in your grant proposal, you include that in, and now it opens up the door for more funding. Another key thing is an action plan or a project plan, which talks about your roadmap on how you're going to use the funding. So yes, I need $100,000, but in 6 months, I'm going to do this. In 12 months, I'm going to make this happen. In 18 months, I'm going to have the entire funding spent and completed. And that also grabs the funder's attention as well.
Yeah. Okay. That's I'm glad that you brought that up, of like, how am I going to use the funding? And so here's the thing, as entrepreneurs, especially when you're in those early stages, because I'm curious to kind of get your mindset on how you even frame and deliver that answer, which is like, yeah, there's a lot of things that I have a plan of how I want to do it, but it's always unexpected. Like what actually happens in reality versus the plan, those are like two completely different things. And so as you're kind of sharing like how you're going to use the money and where it's going to be used and what it's going to achieve, how do you kind of get that balance right? Because I guess you don't know if in 3 months you're going to be able to do this, or 6 months. Like as an entrepreneur, things are changing day to day.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about that.
Yep. So I'll give you an example. March 2025, I'm hosting a conference. I know that this conference is going to cost me $50,000. Throwing that out there, but $50,000, right? So I'm able to kind of window shop. I know that I'm going to give out a $5,000 grant. So that's $5,000 of the $50,000 budget. I know that videographer and team to record is going to cost me $10,000. I know that the venue is going to cost me another $10,000. I know that marketing and advertising is going to cost another $5,000. So now I have a breakdown of everything that I'm going to do. I might say, hey, we're going to allow 50 entrepreneurs to come in for free so we can educate them, and the normal ticket cost is $100. So now I'm able to include that in my budget. So now I'm incorporating community service, community impact, and I'm giving something away as well. So now the funder sees my breakdown. Now, if something happens, right? Let's just say I decide to do a $2,500 grant instead of a $5,000 grant. the funders won't get upset, right? We're still taking the money, reinvesting it back into our business. Courtesy, you can always let them know, like, hey, this is, once I finish the project, hey, this is what we actually spent the money on. It all went back towards the business or reinvesting into the conference, but there were kind of some adjustments or some changes. So even though you have a budget, it doesn't have to be to the penny of what you spend it on. You just can't go to Dubai with the money when you get it. But as long as you're reinvesting it back into the business, you're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, where my mind went, even if we just put getting the money to one side, and obviously we want the money, but just getting the actual grant to one side, it's actually just a really good exercise to do as an entrepreneur, because I think that question, it's almost a good thought experiment to do, which is like, if I gave you, for example, $50,000 right now for your business, how would you use that money?
How would you use it?
And I think I would say, I don't know, 90%, 95, 99% of entrepreneurs, if you ask them that, they probably wouldn't know the exact answer. But you need to know the answer.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, if things actually went well, if you got this money, how would you deploy it? And so even just aside from actually getting the grant, that is something incredibly valuable just to know and plan out in your business.
Yep, you should have the confidence in your brand, which is why I encourage writing the one grant every day, because not only is it putting something in your pipeline, it's building the confidence up that you have in your business and in your vision. And you get better and better and better in answering these questions and being able to, if, you know, I don't know, Damon John was sitting right here right now. He has a grant that he's giving out for $25,000, and he asks you how you're going to use it in your business. Now you are comfortable with answering that question because you've applied for all these grants. You know exactly what to do. So it's definitely a great exercise to do, so you build that confidence up in your brand as well.
You know what I'm curious to understand is, say that someone's watching this and they were very much in the situation that you were in, right? Where they're a woman starting a business or running a business, they have a child. Are there certain, or I'm assuming there are certain grants which are like specifically targeted for women or moms to apply to? Like, what would be some of those?
Yeah, there are a ton of grants that cater to women entrepreneurs, minority entrepreneurs, mom entrepreneurs. There is a company called Amber Grant. They have a grant that they give out every month. Now, typically, I don't encourage paying application fees. Most grants don't have application fees, but Amber Grant, they do have an application fee, and they just reinvest it back into their grants. But Amber Grant is a great grant that they give out two a month. They give out a grant in a particular industry every month and another grant just to women entrepreneurs. There's another grant called the Galaxy Grant. They give out $4,250 every quarter, and this grant just requires that you answer one question. So these are simple grants that are out there and available. Summer Walker did a grant a couple months ago. I think she does it once a year, but this was just for moms. You had to be a mompreneur, and she just wanted to know your story. So there are so many opportunities out there that are available for women entrepreneurs, mom entrepreneurs. There's so many. I could go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And on. Yeah.
You know, as you list these off, I'm like, it's almost like hiding in, it feels like it's hiding in plain sight, because I'm like, these companies and these names, or even like celebrities of people that you're mentioning, these are like names that a lot of people know, that we're familiar with. Like, I had no idea that Chick-fil-A does a grant.
Every major company or every major corporation has a grant. Either they give it to a nonprofit, or either they have a foundation that they have created and they pour the money into the foundation. It's a tax write-off for them. So at the end of the year, they can say, oh, we gave out all of this money in grants. It's just so they don't have to pay taxes. Walmart has a grant. Starbucks has a grant. Target has a grant. So I tell people all the time, anything that you are investing into, you should be figuring out how it can reinvest back into you. The cameras that you're using, Samsung, Sony, all these companies have grants. Yep.
And then, you know what, I want to go for, we gave some grants for women and for moms. For the guys. And I actually had, I went on your Instagram and I found some of the ones that you recommended for men. The Knight Foundation, the Black Founders Fund, the BMA Community, the Richard King Foundation. I guess any of those, or even other names that like come to mind specifically for men.
Yeah, so full transparency, the Knight Foundation grant is not just for men. There are very few grants out there for men entrepreneurs. I had to dig really, really hard to find those grants. So the Knight Foundation is an amazing platform. They give over $200,000 and they give it out on a rolling basis, which means they have a pool of funding and they always are reviewing grant applications. And as they see people that they want to invest into, they give out the grants. But there are very, very few grants that literally just say just for men. Very few. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough out here. It's tough out here for us. You know what, here's where I want to go, because you've given out so much information, and I love it because we were even talking about that before, that you just give out so much information. At this point, like, you've helped a lot of people get grant funding. You've also seen the value of it in your life, and you mentioned this moment where you're able to retire your mom. And so I think about the person that like started this, that was just trying to like secure like your future, your daughter's future, your family's future. And so almost like take me behind the curtain, like bring me into that moment of like you're able to retire your mom. Like what's even happening and what's the feeling?
Yeah, so I think we'll have to take it back just a little. So working for Wells Fargo, I started teaching. Right, started hosting free courses, free seminars. Now I'm educating people because I know that there's a gap. I see that there's a gap. I'm in the space, and so I start hosting these free seminars, and I get a phone call from my HR department that says, "Hey, based off of the competitive nature of your business, you have to make a decision. Either you can dissolve your business or dissolve your coaching space and no longer coach, or you can continue to work here." So I decided that I don't want to work here anymore. They actually went forward with terminating me. And so I decided that coaching was going to be full-time. I go full-time coaching, and I try to give this everything that I have. I show up on social media. I'm making reels. I'm making, TikToks, and nothing's really clicking. And I had this moment where I did a reel, and I'm highlighting banks. It was Juneteenth. And I think I said five banks to open up your bank account with today on Juneteenth. And I highlighted minority-owned banks, and that reel went crazy. So I was like, oh, wait a minute. So I started posting one reel every single day. So from there, the coaching business just kind of grew. But the key thing that I think I did was I invested into a mentor. And that mentor was able to come in and just help me put the missing pieces, because I was trying to do it all on my own. I was doing my funnels. I was doing my emails. I was doing my text messages. I was doing everything by myself, and it was a disaster. And that mentor came in and was like, no, let me help you. I got you. And that really just elevated my brand. So now I have somebody who can coach me and walk me through just building out this platform. So, didn't happen overnight, but probably about a year and a half or so after coaching, was just able to get to the point to tell my mom, like, hey, I really need you with me. I don't need you getting up at 3:00 in the morning. So, just decided to retire her. It was a struggle because all she knows is, working she worked for, retired from Nissan. That's all she knows. She's been doing it since I was born. I'm 37. So that was a struggle, but she did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was her reaction?
Initially scared, very, very scared. So she still works. She works for me now. So, she was like, are you sure? Because, I'm used to getting a paycheck every month, like once a month. And yeah, I'm like, I'll still give you a paycheck every month. But she was like, how much money do you make? Like, now she wants to be in my business. She's like, let me see.
Yeah.
So she's at a comfort level now. I called her one day applying for jobs. Like, I was like, oh, so you're applying for jobs? You don't trust me? But she's comfortable now. But it was a struggle at first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the feeling like for you personally, just being able to do that?
Joy, complete joy. It required me to, so coaching required me, I relocated back to Nashville, Tennessee, because coaching requires me be on the road so much. So just knowing that she's there with my baby, she's not a baby, she's 13, but she's there with my daughter. making sure she's back and forth to school and everything is smooth. It just allows me to be in this space with a clear mind and be able to really, truly be the face of the brand, just knowing that everything at home is okay.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like just I think peace of mind is like a real luxury. And I even just think about what you were saying about like contrasting that moment of you're working at Wells Fargo, or even like the stress that you had in working when you were doing the daycare centers, to like that peace of mind.
Oh yeah.
You would say that that's been like the biggest thing?
Oh yeah. So I used to get really, really, really bad migraines, like dark room, hours, don't touch me, don't talk to me, really bad. I haven't had a migraine since I left Wells Fargo. So it was like whoa, I really thought something was wrong with me health-wise, and it was just the environment. It was just where I was working. Yeah. So peace of mind is a true luxury.
Yeah. It's interesting because we did I was telling you earlier, we did an episode with Ashley Fox, and she left her job in Wall Street to go and do her company. And I remember we're doing the interview and she says something which I'll always remember, which she says, when she made that decision to leave, it was the first moment in her life that she wasn't being driven or like dragged by something to do something. There was no external reason. It wasn't, I just want to get this money or do this. She said it was the first moment where I was being guided.
That's good.
And it reminded me of this thing I heard someone say this on a podcast. He said your calling will call you. You just need to pick up.
Ooh, that's good.
And it's just like this idea of like, when you're somewhere where you're not meant to be, it's like you can feel it. And it actually has this like physical manifestation, like you're getting the migraines, or you're breaking out in acne, or like, I remember one of the times for me when I was in a job, I've never been depressed in my life, but I remember I would wake up as I was doing this job, I would wake up and I'd feel like a stone, like I would feel so heavy. And it's like your body can almost feel it when you're not in the right spot. And so just to get to that moment where you have that peace of mind is like everything.
Everything. I agree. I remember a moment of pulling in the parking lot at work and crying. Nothing, I couldn't pinpoint what was wrong, but I just wasn't happy. I knew that my time I knew that this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. There's definitely more out there for me. And I'm sure it was just being overwhelmed with work and new mom and, running a business. But I remember pulling in the parking lot and just bawling. Like, nobody's here, nobody's watching. Just have your moment and get it together and go and work.
Yeah. And it's true, because so often I feel like even though we're feeling that pain, it's almost like you have to put the mask back on and go and walk into work and like, it's all good.
Yeah.
But it's not all good.
It's not. But you gotta tough it up and make it happen, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I was in that moment. So when we talk about emotions and peace of mind and just being able to do this, and I really feel like I'm in my passion, and in my journey where I should be, and just being able to help and make an impact, like so many lives. Grant funding it literally changes lives. And this education and just being able to connect with so many different entrepreneurs and teach them this is just life-changing for me. So I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know what, here's where I want to end. Because I think about that scene of you even pulling into work and you're in the car and you're just like bawling and the emotion. And I think about the person, the human being who's like in that position right now, where they've had that moment where it just kind of feels like everything's like falling down, where it's just like, damn, this is almost like the rock bottom. Like I'm feeling it. As someone that's been there, if you could give that human being just one piece of advice, just one thing, what would you tell them?
Don't give up. You got to keep going. Keep going and strive for it. Make a game plan and go after whatever it is that you want. In that moment, I could have threw it all in. In that moment, I could have said, I'm tired of this job. I don't want to be the entrepreneur anymore. I don't want to have the business anymore. But I really took that pain and turned it into power. So I would just say, don't give up.
Take that pain and turn it into power. I love that. Love that. Coach K, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Okay, so if you enjoyed this episode, You're going to absolutely love what we did with this one right here. Click here.